So why is Tucker just abandoning the moral equation here at all? What is he doing here? That's what's sort of fascinating. Now, I think to understand what Tucker's doing here, you have to understand that this particular interview included a lot of conspiratorial thinking. There's a lot of conspiracy theorizing in this particular.
It's a Joe Rogan podcast, dude. That's what happens.
Interview ranging from the CIA killing JFK to 9/11 might be an inside job kind of stuff.
Joe Rogan had Tucker Carlson on the Joe Rogan Experience for an episode. And of course, they touched on some very sensitive topics that people like Jeremy Boring, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, and the rest of the Daily Wire didn't like Tucker Carlson's opinions and Joe Rogan's opinions on that podcast very much. And Ben Shapiro actually did an entire episode basically dedicated to this Tucker Carlson appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience, where he picked apart all of Tucker Carlson's opinions, why he's wrong. And if you don't know, in the past, Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro have had a lot of beef, and they've gone back and forth on they've never actually sat down face to face, I don't believe, but they've appear on different podcasts, talked about each other, and kind of reacted to each other, and had, you know, the kind of wars that we have nowadays with these, you know, conservative pundits, where they won't actually talk to each other, but they'll talk about each other online to other people all the time. That's kind of what they did. And Ben Shapiro obviously still doesn't like Tucker Carlson very much, and he definitely did not like Tucker Carlson's appearance over on the Joe Rogan Experience. Let's check out this reaction from Ben Shapiro to Tucker Carlson being on Joe Rogan.
Is a theory that has now risen on the right that there is something deeply malign about the United States, something deeply wrong with the United States. This was made apparent over the weekend. Tucker Carlson was on Joe Rogan's show. Obviously, I'm very friendly with Joe. I think Joe does a great job during his interviews. And there was a clip from this interview that went particularly viral. This is a clip in which Tucker Carlson calls the United States evil for having dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in
That's just false already, number one. I don't think that Tucker Carlson was saying that the United States is evil forever and always because they dropped an atomic bomb on Japan. I don't think that was ever said by Tucker Carlson. Maybe I'm wrong. But what I think Tucker Carlson did say, and what you'll see right here in the Joe Rogan clip that Ben Shapiro is going to play, is that if you defend that action, you are evil. So yes, that action, in Tucker Carlson's opinion, let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with Tucker, that action of dropping the bombs on Japan was evil. But it's, and also if you defend it going forward, like if you defend it in present day and you say, yes, we 100% should have dropped the bombs on Japan, and there's anyone who refuses to question that, or to even think about, even ponder, was it evil or not, you are evil. He's not saying the United States is forever and always evil because they did that.
1945, ending World War II, and then suggest that anyone who would justify that is also evil, which is a very traditionally left-wing perspective. It is not traditionally a particularly right-wing perspective, because most people on the conservative side of the aisle tend to believe that America is a force for good in the world. And as we'll discuss, it turns out that dropping the atomic bomb on Japan was necessary for ending World War II and likely saved millions of lives, both American and Japanese. But here is Tucker.
And therefore, because America is a force for good in the world, we must defend any and everything they always do and never, ever question anything that the government ever does. Right, Ben? Is that what we should be doing? Is that what the Daily Wire wants you to do now? Never question anything. Is that why Candace Owens got fired? Because that's what the Daily Wire stands for now. Never question a single thing that the government ever does, because the CEO of the Daily Wire, Jeremy Boring, came out and said, you know, if you believe that, or if you even question the motives of the people, or who the people actually were behind 9/11, did we actually land on the moon, any of these things, or the, you know, the Japan bombings, if you question any of these things, the motives behind them, or the people who are actually behind them, you are not a critical thinker, according to Jeremy Boring. If you ask any questions about the motives of any of these things, or was the U.S. government involved, should they have done that or not? That's what the Daily Wire is now.
Well, you could say the same about the atomic bomb, right?
Yes, you could.
And you could say that we have to develop it like Oppenheimer felt before the Nazis did.
I love that. How'd that work? How'd that work?
Well,
I love, by the way, that people on my side, I'll just admit it, on the right, you know, have spent the last 80 years defending dropping nuclear weapons on civilians. Like, are you joking?
Right.
That's just like prima facie evil.
Yeah.
If you can't, well, if we hadn't done that, then this, that, the other thing, that was actually a great saving.
And they're defending it now. I mean, it's not nuclear weapons, obviously, but it's still, in the Middle East, there's innocent people dying because of, you know, I don't want to minimize what happened to originally spark this whole thing, but because of a couple of attacks from an extremist group in Palestine, now there's hospitals being bombed and churches and schools and stuff like this being bombed in Gaza, in Palestine. There's innocent people dying. And guess who else is defending, who's also defending that? The Daily Wire and Ben Shapiro. I don't know, man. I don't know about those people. Let me know in the comments. Do you agree or disagree? I would rather them both not happen, to be honest. And I understand this is just the ugly reality of war. Like, it has to happen. People are going to die. I understand that. But to defend them, even especially when it's not America involved and you are American, to defend innocent people dying from bombings and say, yes, this should be happening. I am glad this is happening. You might be sick in the head a little bit. You have to admit that. And Daily Wire is defending not only the U.S. bombing of Japan, but defending the innocent people dying in the Middle East, and not just defending it, but saying that we should do more.
No, it's wrong to drop nuclear weapons on people. And if you find yourself arguing that it's a good thing to drop nuclear weapons on people, then you are evil. Like, it's not a tough one, right? It's not a hard call for you. It's not a hard call for me. So with that in mind, like, why would you want nuclear weapons? It's like just a mindless, childish sort of intellectual exercise to justify, like, oh no, it's really good because someone else will get it. How about no? How about like spending all of your effort to prevent this from happening?
Okay, actually, what would be childish is to assume that there are no other players in the world, for example, trying to develop nuclear weapons. The fact is the Nazis were trying to develop nuclear weapons. There was, in fact, a nuclear arms race that was happening at the time. Not only that, as it turns out, the Soviet Union then developed nuclear weapons. And it is mutually assured destruction and nuclear deterrence that has kept the world largely from sinking into another World War III-like mass casualty morass because of the horror of dropping the nuclear bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the first place. By the way, when he says things like, how exactly would you justify, why are we talking about how many lives it would save? It's just wrong to drop the bomb. Well, no, actually, if you end up saving more lives than are cost by the dropping of the atomic bomb, then it is morally justified to drop the atomic bomb. And that happens to be the reality of the situation. Evan.
Well, the difference, I mean, I know it's like trading lives for lives and everything. And it's not a fun conversation to have, but the difference is when there's lives lost in war, in battle, it's usually fighting age men shooting at and fighting other fighting age men. When you drop bombs on people, there's going to be children, innocent people, innocent women, innocent children, old people who are in old folks' homes. All of these things, they're all going to die. And there's nothing that they could do. Like, they had no choice. That they didn't choose to go into battle or not. They didn't shoot at other people and kill other people in the battle. They just die because they were in the spot that the bomb was placed. That they decided to drop the bomb on. So that's one difference. Another thing that's ironic about this entire thing is I believe what led to Tucker Carlson even bringing that up to Joe Rogan was that Joe and Tucker were talking about AI and should they stop AI, or should everybody just be able to, obtain artificial intelligence at its highest form. And Joe Rogan said, couldn't you make that same argument? Because Tucker was saying that we probably should shut AI down because we understand where it leads. And Joe Rogan said, well, you can kind of say the same thing about nuclear weapons, right? And Tucker said, yes, absolutely. We should have shut it down because look at the damage and the catastrophes and the fatalities that have come from nuclear weapons. We should probably learn from that. And for AI, we should shut it down because all of the smartest people in the world are telling us this is not going to end well. And we know from history that this is not going to end well if AI continues down the path that it's going right now. So that's what this whole thing came from. And everybody took the part about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and that's what they're all crying about. That's what the Daily Wire is crying about. Because if you ever say lives shouldn't be lost, that's when the Daily Wire draws the line. No, lives should always be lost.
Thomas wrote in the Washington Post fairly recently, the commanders of the Japanese armed forces were fanatics. On August 9th, after Washington dropped the second bomb on Nagasaki, Japan's war minister, General Korichika Anami, asked his fellow members of the Supreme War Council, quote, would not it be wondrous for the whole nation to be destroyed like a beautiful flower? The rulers were fatalistic about taking the rest of the nation with them. The 1 million will die for the emperor was a common headline in the state-controlled press. Even after Hiroshima and Nagasaki had been destroyed, and after the Russians had even invaded Japanese-occupied Manchuria, 6 members of the Supreme War Council deadlocked 3-3 on whether to surrender. After the dropping of the second bomb, when Emperor Hirohito decided that he wanted to end the debate and surrender, he had to run away from members of his own military who were threatening to kidnap him and who were trying to find the recording of him surrendering before it could be broadcast on radio to destroy the recording.
Look, I understand the point that Ben Shapiro is trying to make here about Tucker and about Joe Rogan, but he's kind of making the opposite point right now. I understand in hindsight, yes, like it could have been a good decision because we probably did save lives, even though, like I said, those probably, innocent children, women, people who never been to war or anything, lives were lost. And the other way around, it would be fighting age men who are fighting against the United States, and everything would have been lost. But anyway, the point that Ben Shapiro is making here is that even though we dropped the atomic bombs on Japan, there was still a really good chance that they wouldn't surrender, and those lives would have been lost anyway. So it wasn't a black and white thing where the decision was obvious, where you could say, yes, you dropped the bombs on Japan, they will 100% surrender. They almost didn't surrender, and those lives were almost lost anyway, even though those innocents were killed with those bombs. So the argument, this isn't a 100% W for Ben Shapiro against Tucker and Joe Rogan here, because what Ben Shapiro is saying is basically, yeah, if we chose, even if whatever way we chose, we didn't know. So it's not like there wasn't a right or wrong answer. You can't just 100% say, yes, the United States was 100% morally correct to drop those bombs because we knew for a 100% fact it would save lives. That wasn't the case. It never was, and it never will be.
So yes, it turns out that it was necessary. By the way, if we had not dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the alternative was either an amphibious assault that would have cost probably 1 million American lives, or more likely a giant blockade of the island of Japan, including the mass starvation of the civilian population, which would have resulted in millions of dead Japanese. So why is Tucker just abandoning the moral equation here at all? What is he doing here? That's what's sort of fascinating. Now, I think to understand what Tucker's doing here, you have to understand that this particular interview included a lot of conspiratorial thinking. There's a lot of conspiracy theorizing in this particular.
It's a Joe Rogan podcast, dude. That's what happens.
Interview, ranging from the CIA killing JFK to 9/11 might be an inside job kind of stuff. So here is Tucker implying that 9/11 might be an inside job.
The wildest thing about Tower 7 is that if you just say it looks like a controlled demolition, people get mad at you.
Why?
Well, I don't know.
Well,
because I'm not saying that it is a controlled demolition, but I'm saying if you watch it, it looks like a controlled demolition.
But that happens all the time. Buildings catch fire and they just implode in on themselves. I think it happens every week, right? All these poultry plants and manufacturing plants that keep getting burned through fire. They all
it's the way it went down.
Yeah. So I say, why do they respond that way? And of course, I responded that way. So, and I think looking back, the reason that I did was because if you call that into question, you had to ask a lot of other really obvious questions you didn't want to deal with, and you might arrive at the conclusion that a lot of your most basic assumptions are false and that you've been had, and it's just too destabilizing, maybe.
Right.
Okay, so the idea there from Tucker is that if you start...
By the way, I don't think that's the case for Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire. I think the Daily Wire is fully leaning into this to the frame of we are a revenue generating business, and the best way for us to generate more revenue and not take any hits is to just fully align with the US government and never question anything that they tell us, any of the mainstream storylines that they tell us. I don't see any issue with questioning anything that the US government has done. Personally, I don't think the US government, as it was formed originally, would see an issue with that either. I think the current regime, the current US government probably would see an issue with that. And that's why the Daily Wire doesn't want to do it. And that's why the Daily Wire wants to act like there's no reason to question the motives behind anything. 9/11, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the moon landing, anything. There's no conspiracy theories that ever exist. I'm not one of those people that thinks everything is a conspiracy theory. I think those people are obnoxious, but I definitely think there is no issue with at least questioning it. Like at least just asking the question. And I think he's going to address that here.
Asking questions about Tower 7, then that might bring further questions about if Tower 7 was brought down, for example, by a force inside the United States, then what exactly happened with the other two towers and all the rest of this sort of stuff. So what's going on here? I mean, really, it's a serious question. What's going on here with Tucker? So he tries to explain it. He says that he was actually radicalized by 2017. That basically until 2017, he believed a lot of narratives that were told by the government and by the mainstream media. And then after 2016, 2017, when it appeared that the intelligence community was militarized against Donald Trump, this is what radicalized him into basically becoming uber critical of everything. This is his.
If you enjoy content like this, then make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. It really does help me out a ton. Let's get back to the video.
Story.
Probably unlike you, I didn't have any opinions like that. I was like, fluoride, come on. 9/11, shut up. Yeah. UFOs, you're crazy. You know what I
Right,
mean? I just
right.
I had this reflexive. I'm ashamed of it. I'm not bragging about it, but it was 2017, and really it was the Trump campaign. It wasn't that I was like so in love with Trump, though I've always liked Trump because he's like hilarious and charming and all that. But I wasn't like a Trumper or anything. But it was watching that campaign, and particularly his claim that they were spying on him, and I was like, really? You're not the intel services and federal law enforcement, FBI, do not spy on presidential campaigns. Like, that's so out of the realm. That's so crazy. Like, that could never happen because, of course, there's no democracy in a system like that. And fundamentally, we're a democracy, an imperfect one. It kind of lumbers along, but like, it's not fake. And then that turned out to be true. And I knew it was true. And that just blew my mind. So I began a process still ongoing of reassessing a lot of other things. Like, okay.
And this is what people are scared of too. This is what Tucker and Ben Shapiro were referring to, where once you start to recognize some things that we have been told as the mainstream narrative from the US government, from the mainstream media, are wrong, are false, that we've been lied to, it's scary. You have to now, that's an inflection point where you have to decide, am I willing to question literally everything that I've been told my entire life from the government, from mainstream media, or would I rather just bury my head in the sand and continue to believe the mainstream narrative that has been told to me? That's when you have to decide. And Tucker Carlson, as he's telling Joe Rogan here, decided it was time to question everything. Ben Shapiro, the Daily Wire, Jeremy Boring, and the rest of them, they decide, no, let's just bury our head in the sand and just generate as much revenue as possible. That's the difference.
Okay, well, if that was not true, what else is not true? And what else that they told me was a conspiracy theory might actually have some basis in fact? And
Okay, so in other words, he went all the way from, I believe all the narratives to I believe none of the narratives. In fact, I believe the counter of the set of facts with which I am presented. Now, first of all, let me just say about 2016, 2017. Yes, it is incredibly disturbing that the intelligence community was militarized against Donald Trump on the basis of a bunch of trumped up nonsense from the Hillary Clinton campaign. Also, if this exploded your worldview as a conservative, that I find that surprising, because as a conservative, you're supposed to be generally skeptical of government power. And not only that,
Are you supposed to? Am I going crazy? I didn't watch this part. I didn't watch this far into the interview or into this episode before I started this video. This guy just said, Ben Shapiro just said, as a conservative, you're supposed to be naturally skeptical of government power. And this whole thing is built around, this whole episode is built around why Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan are insane for talking conspiracy theories, number one, on a Joe Rogan Experience, which is what everybody does on Joe Rogan Experience. And number two, as a conservative, trying to question the moon landing, Nagasaki, Hiroshima, 9/11, these things. Ben Shapiro is trying to make them out to seem like lunatics. And Ben Shapiro literally just said himself, as a conservative, you're supposed to be naturally skeptical about government power. Am I going crazy? Let me know in the comments. Maybe I'll make a part 2 on this Ben Shapiro episode, but that'll do it for now. Let me know in the comments what you're thinking about this whole Ben Shapiro versus Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan situation. This whole Daily Wire thing is just rubbing me the wrong way, man. Making me pretty much permanently a non-Daily Wire fan. But let me know in the comments how you're feeling. Maybe you agree with Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire. Let me know. If you did enjoy the video, though, please leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I hope to see you guys on the next one.